Welcome to Payoff Pitch, Action Network's Major League Baseball betting podcast. I'm Mike Calabrese, joined today by Sean Zerillo to talk the full slate in the bigs here on Friday. We're going to get a little bit of YRFI NRFI talk from Billy Ward at the end of the episode as well. But before we jump in here, two things to discuss. First, it's rivalry weekend. Major League Baseball setting up interstate matchups in Pennsylvania, Ohio, Missouri, Florida, California, just to name a few. So a lot of familiarity, hoping to build some rivalries there, some bad blood, at least to, get the juices flowing for some of these teams that could use a little bit of energy to kind of turn around some lackluster seasons. We'll talk about some of those matchups soon. But one team in particular I want to discuss right now, and I want to pick your brain a little bit, Sean, in terms of how you view teams that go on winning streaks, but when you look under the hood, perhaps you're not all that impressed. The Minnesota Twins. They've beat the Orioles 6 times in the past 2 weeks. Has their winning streak done anything to really change your opinion of them in terms of their long-term projection for 2025?
It's tough. I was high in the Twins, relatively high in the Twins coming into the season. I bet them to make the playoffs at I think about minus 120. Their playoff odds now are back closer to 60%, almost across the board. Every projection system views them as more likely than not to make the playoffs at this point. In fact, as much as we've talked about the AL East being strong, likely to get 3 playoff teams, none of the projection systems view the AL East as likely to get more than 1 playoff team at this point. Now, obviously, multiple teams in the 40% plus range. I'm just saying greater or lower than 50%. Consensus right now, the projection systems have 3 teams coming out of the West: the Mariners, the Rangers, and the Astros, all above 50% on average across the board. So the path for Minnesota, they could get in with a second wildcard spot if the AL East is going to continue to be as weak as it is. I thought they were the second best team in the AL Central coming into the season. Did bet the Tigers to win the division at plus 275, but I also bet Minnesota to make the playoffs as a partial hedge, but also because I thought they could get 2 teams in. Now, my biggest concern with this team going forward is lack of acquisitions. They're probably not going to add anything outside to this roster, at least anything significant, because the poll adds the owners are actively shopping the team, likely to sell at some point. They didn't invest any money in this roster over this offseason, over the past couple of off seasons. So I don't think you're going to get anything substantial added to this roster in order to make them a contender or to fortify their roster if they are in playoff positioning in about 6 weeks. That said, they do have 2 really good young arms in the minors, Zebby Matthews, David Festa. I'm really high on both of those guys. They just sent down Simeon Woods Richardson yesterday. They're really good at pitcher development, bullpen development. They develop a number of high leverage arms in recent years who throw very hard. Brock Stewart just came back for their bullpen. So they have a top 5, top 3 maybe, even bullpen in baseball. When their high leverage relievers are all going, they're very difficult to score on. The starting pitching depth is there right now. They have Pablo, they have Joe Ryan. Paddock's pitching much better of late. So it seems like the pitching's fine. The position players never seem to be able to stay healthy. And we'll discuss Carlos Correa and Byron Buxton running into each other. But Royce Lewis already had his annual injury. We'll see if he ends up having another one. Brooks Lee had an injury last year that he came back from. But in terms of like position player prospect depth, they've already brought up Luke Keeschall, who got hurt. The only other guy who may come up and contribute for them is Emmanuel Rodriguez, who I believe is their top prospect, one of their top prospects, but a very dynamic outfield prospect. The problem is he's striking out about 35% of the time in AAA. So there's certainly talent on this roster. The bullpen is very high end. They have 2, ace caliber, number 1, number 2 caliber starting pitchers, and they have a number of all-star caliber hitters, but overall, the depth isn't fully there if guys continue to get hurt, and they're not going to add anything external. So I think that 60% projection right now may be a little too high because it's projecting them to be a bit healthier than I would be the rest of the way. So I wouldn't bet into it at this point, and I'm certainly not going to bet on a team that's not going to bet or invest in themselves. So yeah, it's good to see them get back in the race. I thought they were going to be a competitive team coming into the year, really fell flat early on. The Rangers, too. The Rangers were awesome early on, went through a lull. Now the Rangers are back a half game within the lead of the AL West. So it seemed like the Cubs are running away with the NL Central earlier on. Now the Cardinals are only a game behind the Cubs. Like these division races are starting to get a little bit more interesting now that teams with slow starts are catching up.
Before we get to your best bet, I think I misspoke at the top. It's not an interstate matchup; it's an intrastate matchup for all of these teams. Like you look at Tampa playing Miami down in South Florida. You got the two teams in LA going off. Putting betting aside just for a moment, this is clearly a narrative. They're trying to build a bit of a theme weekend here in the bigs. Which one are you looking forward to? The Subway Series? What's going on with Chicago? The North Side South Side matchup? Anything pique your interest just in terms of a viewing experience?
Soto going back to the Bronx certainly tonight will be of interest. I actually enjoy the ones that are like clearly not rivalries that they're trying to force, like the Rockies and the Diamondbacks. They're like, we don't have anybody for you, so you guys can play each other. The Twins and the Brewers, like, you guys are kind of close, but you don't really have any hatred towards one another. So yeah, it's some of them are very forced. Others not so much. They used to send what was it? The Phillies. They used to send the Phillies up to Boston when like the AL East teams would match up, and they're like, yeah, Philly and Boston, or Boston and Atlanta were much more natural like rivals just because of the Braves thing, the Boston Braves going back the day. But some of them feel very forced. Others are much more interesting. But like, Nationals Orioles, I think is interesting because the Nationals are playing to expectations. The Orioles are playing significantly below expectations. This seems like a series that the Orioles would need to beat up on their crosstown rival. And in fact, the Nationals have a significant starting pitching edge today. We'll get to that game, but this seems like the time where the Orioles should be adding some wins onto their record, and playing a team that is looking for bragging rights against you, maybe not the best spot to do it.
We're going to stick with one of these intra-state matchups in the Show Me State showdown between the Royals and the Cardinals. You like the Royals in the first five and the game as well for your best bet. Now, the Cards have been hot, but this is the end of a very long road trip for them. They played the Phillies and the Nationals, and taking all of that into account in terms of how much they've been playing on the road. They did have a travel day after a doubleheader on Wednesday against the Phillies. But KC is one of the best home teams in the majors. They have a 16-7 record on their home diamond, and this potentially could be a buy low spot on Cole Reagans. What's going on with his stuff this year? I mean, he went from a Cy Young contender threat, certainly in the preseason. He's been getting pounded for much of this year, but you think this is an opportunity to buy low on him to get things moving in the right direction?
Yeah, I think he's just been unlucky. 375 batting average on balls in play, 296 for his career. His strikeout rate is up significantly this season. 30.4% strikeout minus walk rate. It was 20.5% last season. He has a strikeout rate of 38%. He's faced 172 batters this season. He's recorded 122 outs. 61 of those, exactly half, have been via the strikeout. His strikeout rate right now ranks near where Edwin Diaz was a couple of years ago. He's like among the elite high-end relief pitchers in terms of strikeout rate, highest in baseball this year. I think Cole Reagans is going to be absolutely fine. I just think he's given up a bunch of rinky-dink singles that normally would not fall in, that have fallen in this year, leading to an ERA of 4.2 on a 375 batting average on balls in play. His expected ERA is 2.3. His expected ERA last year was 3.3. So the increased strikeout rate, the reduced strikeout, or the reduced expected ERA, I think Cole Reagans is actually a better version than what we've seen of him so far. Stuff all checks out under the hood. Everything looks fine. Andre Palante, on the other hand, a reduced version of what we've become accustomed to in recent years. I think a large part of that is the shortened strike zone, the smaller strike zone. He's just getting pinched a little bit more than he's used to in the past. His strikeout minus walk rate is down to 6.5%. It was 9% last year. League average around 13.5%, but we regularly talk about Palante and the high ground ball rate because that's what gives him a high floor. He's going to walk guys. He's going to give up base hits and put guys on base. He still has that high ground ball rate. It's still in the mid 60s, one of, if not the highest in baseball, but his hard hit rate is spiking. It's gone up from about 40% to 46% this season. His stuff plus is down from 96 to 89. His bot ERA is up from 4.6 to 5.3. So it's not just the command. His stuff has worsened too. Batters are squaring him up a little bit more consistently. I made the Royals about minus 200 in either half tonight. First five in full game. I'm comfortable with them in either half. I would say about minus 180 for the first 5 innings, minus 175 for the full game. We'd shorten it up just a little bit for the full game, given the Cardinals' bullpen quality. The one aspect of this game that's intriguing to me that I'm probably not betting into is the wind and the weather. 80 degrees at first pitch, 18 mile an hour winds. 18 mile an hour winds blowing out to right field at Kauffman Stadium tonight, but just 50% humidity. We're going to talk about a lot of other games around the country tonight with very high humidity, 75% plus, 80% plus around the country. Kansas City a little bit lower today, but the wind is blowing out aggressively. There's been a lot of sharp buying on this under and then sharp pushback on the over. I kind of want to see if I can get a shorter price on the over 8.5, maybe a plus money over 8.5 before I bet the over, because I make this about 8.75 given the lower humidity. If it was a little bit more humid, I would have it closer to 9. So a lean over 8.5, but not betting it as of yet. Also, it's Friday, it's early. We only had one game that's a carryover series from yesterday. So we only have one umpire going into today. Considering I'm borderline on a bunch of these totals, I'm going to wait for lineups, going to wait for umpires before we fire anything else on today's slate.
As you already know, if you're listening to this podcast, the WNBA season has tipped off. And if you're an Action Network Pro subscriber, our brand new WNBA projections are now available in the Action Network app. So whether you're looking for a betting edge on WNBA sides, totals, or player props, Action Pro projections are the perfect tool for your toolbox this season. If you aren't an Action Pro subscriber yet, you can get $20 off an annual subscription right now. Just visit actionnetwork.com/pro to sign up. That's $20 off an annual subscription at actionnetwork.com/pro. All right, we turn to your favorite underdog, which is now turning into an underdogs segment. You've been bringing multiple here the last few episodes, which is always great to see. Let's start with Atlanta at plus money. Don't look now, but the Braves have clawed back to 500 after opening the season 1-8. The staff and the defense have been incredibly impressive, really all month long. 4th in fielding percentage in the NL, 5th in bullpen ERA, and Chris Sale gets the ball here, and he's been impressive in his last 5 starts. He's allowed 7 earned runs across 28 2/3 innings worth of work, and he's missing a lot of bats in that stretch as well, 40 Ks across those 28 innings plus. You think the Braves can, do some damage if they can get Crochet, his pitch count, up and get into this bullpen? Because if they get there by, let's call it the 7th inning, you think the advantage starts to flip to the Braves?
Yeah, and as you mentioned off the top, I think they have a significant defensive advantage in this series too. Matters a little bit less with 2 higher strikeout pitchers today, going to get fewer balls in play. This is another game with good over weather as well. 75 degrees at first pitch, high humidity, wind blowing out towards the monster today. Now there was a sharp buy on the under 8 just before we jumped on here. Maybe we can get an over 7.5 at -110 because I make this right around 8. So I would consider and I would lean over, even though we have 2 very high-end starting pitchers. The metrics between Sale and Crochet this season almost identical. 3.15 expected FIP for Sale, 3.14 for Crochet. 3.6 body array for Sale, 3.54 for Crochet. They're within a 10th, the 10th digit. 3.2 expected ERA for Sale, 3.37 for Crochet. Like very similar seasons. Sale the slightly better strikeout minus walk rate. Crochet the slightly better stuff and pitching plus metrics. But Crochet's been a little bit lucky this season. 265 batting average on balls in play, 81% strain rate. He's at 300 and about 74%, 75% for his career. 300 right around league average. That is where most pitchers regress to. Sale, very much like Cole Reagan's, is running a 392 BABIP and a 75% strain rate. So strain rate fine, but he is around a 299 career BABIP. So Sale just getting a little bit unlucky this season. That's why the ERA has gone up a little bit. I think him and Crochet project very similarly, very similar talent levels. I would put Crochet above Sale in a vacuum, but right now they're performing very comparably. But it's the defensive edge for Atlanta that really stands out to me. They're 2nd in defensive runs saved this year. They are 3rd in outs above average. They're above average at every position except for left field and center field. They've tried to supplement their Acuna loss, other losses with defense, putting Nick Allen in there a bunch. The Red Sox are below average in both defensive metrics, 17th in defensive runs saved, 19th in outs above average. So not a ton of room here. I wouldn't bet the Braves plus 105. I made them very slight favorites. I think I have them at -101 or -102 in this game. And then, as I said, I would lean over to a 7.5. If it comes down to 7.5 -110, I would consider the over projecting this total closer to 8. But again, going to wait for lineups. I'm going to wait for umpires before locking that in.
From the Braves to another team that's kind of, let's just call it what it is. Toronto has underperformed this season. They're treading water right around 500, and now they're putting Bowden Francis on the bump here. He doesn't necessarily instill confidence, But I assume this is purely fade of Jack Flaherty going through one of the worst stretches of his career. He's lost 5 straight decisions, and he's given up 13 earned runs across his last 3 starts. It's as simple as that with Toronto at about plus 115 in this matchup.
Yeah, there's a couple bets that I didn't necessarily want to place today. Like betting on Bowden Francis is not something I'm trying to do right now. I've bet against him a few times this season. He was super underrated last year, came into this season overrated, and now he may be getting towards underrated again because despite pitching poorly, I mean, his expected ERA is around 6.3. The stuff under the hood says he should be similar to what he's been the past couple of years. The stuff looks fine. The strikeout minus walk rate is fine. It's right below league average, but he seems to be a BABIP suppression guy overall. His career batting average on balls in play is around like 240. So I think he can continue to induce weak contact. His past couple of starts have been a lot better than the ones that preceded it. He is just getting squared up much more this season. But as I said, the pitch modeling metrics, I mean, 3.7 body array, 3.7 last year, 3.8 this year. So 3.7 the past 2 years, 3.8 this year. He might be like a streaky guy too, like a hot gold guy who is either has his arm slot and is feeling it. We'll get to another guy like that in a second. But yeah, like just a goofy overall profile. Career 223 BABIP. He has a 346 ERA, a 4.7 FIPS. That explains the difference in those two numbers. But I actually think he can be a BABIP, a sub 300, like closer to a 270 BABIP guy going forward. Jack Flaherty is really struggling, and I think it's related to the arm struggles we saw last year. The more he pitched into the season, when he was on regular rest last year, that's when it became a real issue. The Tigers, if you look at his game logs, have done really well to keep him on 6 days rest, 7 days rest this year. This start is coming on 6 days rest, but so did his last one, and he didn't pitch particularly well. 4.7 expected ERA for Flaherty, a 4.6 ERA, so he's deserved every bit of it. A 5.01 bot ERA. Last year, he was at a 3.5 expected ERA and a 4.3 bot ERA, and his velocity is dipping in season. First start of the year, 93.6. He was at 92.8 in his most recent start. And anytime his slider goes below that 84 mile an hour, 85 mile an hour level, starts to crawl into the 83s, it becomes a real problem for him and becomes much less effective. There's a major tipping point for Flaherty with his slider at that velocity level, and he's starting to trend below it right now. So I think that is the large part of his struggles, is just the velocity dip due to fatigue after injuries. Last season, made it through all the way to the end. The Dodgers managed them all in the playoffs, had a couple hiccups in the playoffs, but he ultimately did get to the finish line. I think there's a reason the market was not so hot for him as a free agent this offseason, and I think you're starting to see the effects of all of those innings adding up at this point. Had a really good run, but I do think, there was a multiple year period where Jack Flaherty couldn't stay healthy and was very ineffective. And unfortunately, it seems like it's trending that direction at this point. And speaking of the Tigers' divisional chances, and the Twins and the teams behind them, if they lose Jack Flaherty, yes, the Tigers will be more aggressive and will go out to supplement that with a move somewhere. But if they don't have Flaherty in their rotation and, having a rotation with Skubal, Flaherty, Mize, like that looked like a potentially very effective contender-oriented rotation come October. If Flaherty is going to continue declining and not be there for them at the end of the season, it does take, some chances, some percentage off of their World Series probability.
Before we get to Billy Ward's YRFI Nerfies, we're going to go through the rest of your card here, Sean. The Friday slate, you got a lot of overs, so we're going to be praying for some big innings here. Let's start in the state of Ohio. OHIO, we got the Guardians Reds. We got warm weather. We got a crosswind in the outfield, but it's not blowing in critically. But really, I think this over begins and ends, correct me if I'm wrong, with the Reds' Brady Singer, who has an 11.88 ERA this month. Do you think the Guardians can put up a big number against him?
Yeah, Manzardo's kind of added a unique element to, not a unique element, but he's kind of supplemented what Josh Naylor gave them last season. It seemed like their offense would take a big step back. Manzardo's kind of filled in those gaps. And Cleveland's better at managing their organization probably than any other team dollar for dollar. But despite the wind, being a cross breeze, not necessarily blowing out, it's going to be warm in Cincinnati and it's going to be very humid. And it's going to be raining, which is going to create some of the humidity. 78% humidity. 82 degrees at first pitch, so good hitting weather in Cincinnati today. It wasn't yesterday afternoon as well. The White Sox just couldn't put anything on the board against Nick Martinez. But I'm actually down on Tanner Bybee this season as well. I've bet against Bybee quite a bit. I think his fastball looks really flat. He's tinkering with his arsenal. So that's partially led to, I think, a reduction in underlying metrics. He was at a 3.7 expected ERA last year, up a half run this year to 4.23. He was at a 20% strikeout minus walk rate last year, which is among the number 2, number 1 starting pitchers. This year, it's below the major league average. He's at 8%. He's throwing fewer fastballs, fewer sliders, fewer curveballs. He's throwing his cutter and sinker, a cutter and sinker, combined nearly 40% of the time this year. This is not a pitch he threw, not pitches he threw last year. So he's almost completely revamped his arsenal after having a pretty successful season. That, to me, indicates doesn't trust the fastball and maybe losing some velocity, some stuff off of it, trying to induce more weak contact with the cutters and the sinkers. And his past couple starts have been better, but if he's a guy who's going to allow a higher number of balls in play with a reduced strikeout rate relative to last year, playing in a ballpark that is going to promote offense because of the humidity and its natural dimensions in general, I make this total about 9.6. So over 9 to minus 110, minus 112. There has been quite a bit of resistance here on the under. People hitting the under 9. I'm obviously on the over. So of the 3 overs I'm about to give out, this is the one I like the least just because of the market movement against it. The Reds keep going under in their games as well. I'm trying to be reasonable in terms of my park adjustment. I didn't actually add anything on to this total, even though I could have. My flat projection, assuming a weather neutral day in Cincinnati, would be 9.6. I probably could have upgraded this one, but I didn't.
All right, we'll head to your second over here between the Phillies and Buccos at Citizens Bank Park. Philly and Pittsburgh near the bottom in the NL in terms of cashing overs this year, but this pitching matchup features Andrew Heaney. And we've said it, from the beginning of the season. At some point, you figured he was going to come back to earth after a red-hot start. Well, 2 of his last 3 starts, he's failed to finish the 5th inning. Batters are also taking him yard regularly over that stretch. Do you think the Phillies lineup can jump on him here?
Yeah, this is the other guy I was talking about in terms of being streaky. I think Heaney throughout his career has been a guy who either has his arm slot or does not and seems to go for a few starts, at a specific level. Always had better underlying metrics than he's performed to. But as you mentioned, 10 walks, 5 strikeouts in his past 3 starts. His BOT ERA on the year is about 3.8, but in those past few starts, it's gone up to 4.4. This also puts the Phillies in their better split as well. They're 8th against lefties on the season, 13th against righties. Pirates technically better against lefties than righties too, getting Ranger Suarez here, but they rank in the bottom 3 in baseball against both left-handed and right-handed pitching. So really not much between it. In fact, I think their ranking may be better against lefties, but they may have a higher WRC plus against righties. So can't even say the Pirates are in their better split, but the Phillies certainly are. And yeah, I think they can get runs off of Heaney tonight. Incredibly humid in Philly today. 90% humidity, might be the highest in the country. 79 degrees at first pitch. It's going to feel like 84 with the humidity. Normally I talk about the real feel being lower than the actual temperature. It's going to be higher in Philly today. And then 5-mile-an-hour winds blowing out towards left field. So an offensive leaning park in general should get a little boost with that humidity, that wind, and the temperatures tonight. Make this total about 9.2. I take over 9 to even money. You can grab over 8.5 right now. I'm happy with that.
We'll close out your run on overs here with the Subway Series, the total sitting at 8.5 between the Yanks and Mets. The Yankees ran out of gas on their West Coast road trip. They scored just 4 runs in their final 2 games in Seattle, but now they got their travel day in. They got to rest up a little bit. They send Rodon to the hill after a rough outing against the A's. He's still been a strikeout machine for much of this season, but the Mets are one of the most disciplined teams at the dish in all of the majors, striking out the 2nd lowest rate in the NL. So you're projecting what in terms of the overall scoring in this one?
Make this 9.5 is good weather today in the Bronx, 71 degrees, but 75% humidity, which I think does increase the run scoring. These are 2 of the best offenses in baseball, especially with the Mets facing a left-handed starter. That puts the Mets in their better split. 126 WRC plus against lefties. They're 4th. They're 8th against righties. They dropped to 113. The Yankees, number 1, number 2 against righty-lefty. Hasn't really mattered. They are better against lefties. They have a 150 WRC plus against left-handed pitching, but Tyler McGill is showing signs of concern as well. Very similar to Jack Flaherty in that his velocity has started to dip in season. He's at 96.4 in his first start of the season, 94.7 in his last outing. He's given up 11 runs in his past 3 starts. McGill has been a very streaky guy throughout his career. not related to arm slot, almost purely related to health. He seems like a guy who, anytime he comes back, is healthy, he's grooving, he's doing fine. And then the more innings you put on that arm, he starts to wear down, starts to become less healthy, the velocity starts to dip, and it becomes much less effective. I should say the velocity on this Stuff Plus also down. It was at 121 in 2 of his first 3 starts. It's been sitting closer to 108 more recently. Still above average, still a good pitcher, just not nearly as effective as these season-long numbers might indicate. And when he's pitching well, he's as effective as an ace-level pitcher. He's very good. But when he is struggling like he is now, you can actually get runs off of him. And obviously the Yankees a tough matchup, but I also think the Mets are particularly tough matchup for Rodon.
The only under on your card today, under 8.5 between Seattle and San Diego. Logan Evans, a bit of a mystery, the 23-year-old in just his 4th career start. He's kind of has a kitchen sink approach. He throws 5 to 6 pitches on a nightly basis. His 2-seamer, though, can generate a lot of ground balls because of its sinking element. And Kolek on the other side in this matchup also can be a ground ball pitcher. If they stay away from those long balls, you like the under in this spot.
Yeah, the Padres have an elite bullpen, so just get me to the 5th inning, with a 3-2 game here, and I feel pretty good about the under 8.5. Projected this total at 7.9. Kolek coming off of a complete game shutout in Colorado. He projects around a league average starting pitcher, slightly below league average, but both of these guys grade out really well in terms of pitch modeling metrics for their sinkers and sliders. Both have an above average sinker slider. Evans also has an above average curveball too, so he can really spin the baseball. 101 Stuff Plus for Evans thus far, 96 for Kolek. So Evans seems like the better pitch modeling projected guy. Kolek has the slightly better FIP projections across projection systems, I think because he is a little bit more of a major league sample. But I think of the two, Evans might be a little bit underrated. 3.9 expected FIP, 18% strikeout minus walk rate in AAA. I think he could be a league average starting pitcher. The Mariners have been phenomenal at developing starting pitching. Brian Wu, who we discussed the other day, looks like one of the best pitchers in the American League now, amongst having Kirby and Gilbert and both of those guys go down. And it's like, it's all right. We got Brian Wu, who's like an AL Cy Young contender. And it's not even all of a sudden. He basically just has the same metrics he's had for the past 3 years. He's just pitching a little bit more. And he's needed a little bit more than he's been needed in the past. So, yeah, very impressed by the Mariners' pitching development overall. And under the hood on both of these guys, seeing the strong sinker slider mix, hopefully we keep the ball on the ground and we get to these bullpens with a relatively low scoring game. So 2 offenses that have definitely impressed this season, but that back half of the Mariners lineup, I still think is overperformed. I view, the final 4 or 5 hitters in that lineup as below average against right-handed pitching. So I think some regression coming for the Mariners and much more likely for the Mariners offense than the Padres offense. But again, made this 7.9, comfortable with the 8.5 to about minus 112, was able to take plus money last night.
It is hold your nose time when it comes to betting the Baltimore Orioles, which is what you're advocating here. Yeah, we're going to try to catch the falling knife on a team that's 2-9 straight up across their last 11. In 7 of those 11 games, they've been held to 3 runs or less. And Cade Povich on the mound here, he's struggled with command. And when he has found the zone, the ball has left the ballpark. So I'm going to be honest with you. You got to sell me on the Orioles. And I think you even have to lay a little bit of juice here, minus 110 in this spot.
Yeah, and I think, that was part of like the Orioles mystery, the Jays mystery, and we'll get to the Brewers was more of a situational spot in the second, but the Orioles and the Jays, I saw the projections. I'm like, I don't really want to bet this, but it's a big edge. I kind of have to. I made the Orioles minus 124. Obviously, Mackenzie Gore, much better than Cade Povich, but I think it's the differential of the bullpens here in the late innings, and you can probably live bet the Orioles if they're down a run, if they're tied after 5 innings, right as Gore is getting to the lineup the 3rd time through, that's when I would consider live betting the Orioles if they're behind here because they have a substantial bullpen edge in this matchup. And I think that's what made clicking minus money on Cade Povich, again, on an Orioles team that has really struggled, like weird and difficult, but also it feels like a trap, right? On the Nationals at minus money a little bit because it seems a little cheap against the team that struggled so much. But yeah, I made this around minus 125 on Baltimore. The Nationals, we've talked about their bullpen. 30th in expected FIP, 28th in strikeout minus walk rate, 28th in body RA. It is an absolute disaster of a unit. Baltimore is closer to league average in all those metrics, but they actually project as a top 10 unit, if not top 5, in my model. So a significant bullpen advantage here, not just what you see on paper, but perhaps even more drastic than that. My bigger concern here is the Orioles offense because they're not hitting it all this season. Last year, they were top 5 against both right-handed and left-handed pitching. This year, they're 9th against righties. They have a 112 WRC plus against righties, but they're 29th against lefties, a 50 WRC plus. Now, obviously, I'm expecting regression. I mean, they had identical marks against righties and lefties last year. Their offense is clearly reduced compared to what it was last season, but they still should not be performing as poorly as they have against left-handed pitching. I have 50 WRC plus against lefties is lower than the Rockies have performed on the road. It is abysmal. I didn't actually look at the OPS or the triple slash line, but that's as bad as it gets and as bad as the team is capable of being this young into a season. So, yeah, I just expecting offensive regression for Baltimore at some point, expecting their hitters to hit a little bit better, but really it comes down to the two bullpens here and a drastic advantage for Baltimore in the late innings. So as I said, pregame up to -112, -113 is fine compared to my projection of -124. The market has actually moved my way, which is good to see. But maybe a good live betting spot if they're behind or, within a run come the 5th inning.
Let's close out your card. You were on the Brewers against the Twins. So I mentioned at the top that potentially could be a paper tiger with all those wins over the Orioles lately. But Joe Ryan has looked the part, to say the least. In 5 of his last 6 starts, he's only given up 1 earned. And his 4-seam fastball is the 3rd best in the AL behind Max Fried and Jacob deGrom, according to Baseball Savant. So why the Brewers in this spot?
Well, Carlos Correa and Byron Buxton ran into one another very hard in yesterday's game. Both had to leave the game. Willie Castro also slid into second base and looked like he got shot by a sniper and couldn't come out of the game because Correa and Buxton had already left, and they basically had nobody left on their bench. So he was hobbled for the remainder of the game. Buxton and Correa are both in concussion protocol today. Remains to be seen whether either or both will be cleared for tonight's game, whether they'll sit, either of them anyway. I would imagine some combination of Correa, Buxton, and Willie Castro are not in the lineup tonight. I think only one of them will be in there, maybe 2 of them, almost certainly not all 3 of them. So this was a lineup issue. The Brewers were about +115 when those injuries occurred. They moved all the way to -108 within a matter of minutes once the market, realized, hey, we can bet tomorrow's lines, assuming these guys are going to be out. Went all the way to -110. I took -106 and then cashed out of it because some plus money popped back up. So the plus money popping back up, later in the night maybe indicates that there's some positive news that somebody got about these guys on their plane home. That said, they remain in concussion protocol. We'll see if they get cleared today. And I make this game about -108 if the Twins have their A lineup. If they do not have their A lineup, I make the Brewers closer to -125. So I think, Joe Ryan's been solid. He's very weather dependent with that fastball and getting squared up. And once it's a little bit warmer, those balls are going to fly out of the yard because it's easy to look at pitch results. All we get of pitch results is at-bats that ended on that pitch. We don't get the process-oriented stuff that goes into those at-bats beforehand. We don't get every single swinging miss on every curveball that gets accounted for, foul ball, that doesn't, right? So we only get at-bats that end in certain results. And as the weather warms up, Joe Ryan is always going to be a guy who gives up a relatively high home run rate because he has a very high fly ball rate because he throws fastballs up in the zone. So as it continues to get warmer, I think the quality of pitch or the results on that pitch will decrease. But really, this is mostly a numbers play given the lineup situation. And I actually like Chad Patrick, who's starting for the Brewers. 103 stuff plus, 103 pitching plus, a 515 body array, which does not compute with the pitching stuff. But he has 3 above average pitches in his arsenal by stuff plus, 107 on his cutter, 105 on his fastball, 106 on his slider. He only throws 93 miles an hour, but the fastball grades are really well. So, models like the characteristics on it. And I think he, too, is going to be a fly ball-oriented, home run reliant pitcher. He has a fly ball or ground ball rate of just 26% thus far. So taking, a big power hitter like Buxton out of the Twins lineup definitely makes an impact with Patrick in there. Twins have an interesting, very unathletic team too, aside from Buxton and aside from Willie Castro. So when you take both of those guys out, the Brewers have a massive speed advantage and a massive defensive advantage over them as well. And I think that's really where most of the edge comes in, is the defense and the base running. The Twins really do not have very many fast guys or very many good defenders. Even Correa's defensive metrics took a real nosedive last year. As he's gotten older, he's dealing with injuries too. So I do think overall Brewers speed defense, they get the advantages in those areas in this game. Twins better bullpen, usually better starting pitching, but I think the lineups are otherwise pretty comparable, assuming Buxton and Correa won't be in.
It's time for some instant gratification gambling. That means we're zeroing in on the first inning across the bigs, which also means it's time to listen to Action Network's predictive analyst Billy Ward as he walks us through his favorite YRFI Nerfies for the Friday slate. Billy, take it away.
Thanks, guys. I'm back with a full Friday of baseball. Not too many YRFIs. I'm trying to be a little bit more selective as we move forward into the season. But the first one I really like, that is the Guardians and Red YRFI. It is now even money at FanDuel. I got it at plus 102 in the app not too long ago. We don't see a lot of plus money YRFIs in a game with a 9-run total, so this one kind of immediately stood out. It is in Cincinnati, one of the best hitters parks in baseball, second or third, depending on where you look and what data you use. The Guardians have a really strong top of the order. Both pitchers here are a little bit tricky to predict. Their first time through the order ERAs are good, but their xFIPs are bad. Usually that has a lot to do with the park, so with this one being in a very hitter-friendly park, I expect the bats to lead to some regression here, especially on the Cleveland side, because Tanner Bibby gets to pitch at a much better park for pitchers for most of his games, and now is traveling to Cincinnati. The next one, taking a big swing here at the Washington Nationals first inning money line. There's two ways you can do this. You can do the three-way money line, which loses in case of a tie. That is plus 300 at FanDuel. That is what I'm doing for half of a unit. The other option is their two-way money line, where you get ties back. That is minus 105 at Caesars. I like the three-way money line better. I have the Nationals about twice as likely to score a first inning run as the Orioles tonight. The Orioles have Cade Povich pitching. His first time through the order, xFIP is in the mid-4s, and the Nationals are fairly strong at the top of the lineup, especially with CJ Abrams. Very good speed and power. Just a good overall top of the lineup. On the other side, Baltimore is facing Mackenzie Gore. Very good pitcher, left-hander. Baltimore's WRC plus as a team ranks 29th against lefties. They have a WRC plus of 50. They've been worse than the Rockies against lefties this year. So very good matchup for the Nationals. Couple different angles on how you want to do it based on your risk tolerance. But I like the 3-1 odds at FanDuel. It's a little bit more fun. And then finally, the Minnesota-Milwaukee NRFI, or no runs. That one's minus 120 at BetMGM, minus 125 at DraftKings or Caesars. Chad Patrick of the Brewers, very surprisingly, 1.02 ERA his first time through the order. He's taking on the Twins, who've actually been a pretty good lineup, but they are without Byron Buxton tonight. He is in the concussion protocol after last night. The rest of their early lineup hitters are slightly above average, where Buxton has been very good. So it's a big downgrade for the Twins. And then on the other side, we have Joe Ryan, another, borderline top flight pitcher, borderline ace. He's been very good, both overall and early in games. We're paying a little bit of juice in that one, but also very good park factor in Milwaukee. That is a big upgrade for Joe Ryan coming from Minnesota there. So with all those factors together, that's enough at minus 120, minus 125. I wouldn't go much past that, though. Thanks, guys. Back to you.
That'll do it for today's episode of Payoff Pitch. Thanks for tuning in. If you'd like to tail some of the bets that you heard from Billy or from Sean in today's episode, look for the quick slip link in the episode description. Don't forget to download the free award-winning Action Network app and leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen to the podcast. Also, check out the Action Network Discord. There's a link in today's episode description of the podcast. It'll allow you to connect with Action Network experts across the majors. And we'll see you back here on Monday for more best bets, underdogs, and all of the plays that we have come to provide on a weekly basis, including those dingers from Grant Neefer. So catch us on Monday. As a reminder, that's also a live show, so you can watch us on YouTube if you want to get the absolute best numbers, just as they are hitting the board from Sean and Grant. For Sean Zerillo, I'm Mike Calabrese. Thanks for listening to Payoff Pitch, the Action Network's Major League Baseball betting podcast. And of course, best of luck with all your bets.